Behold, the spoils of my misadventures. Welcome back to Striking FPV R&D. My name's Ashton, and if the title of this video isn't that much of a hint, well, maybe this will be. So, stuff happened, as you can see, in slow motion no less, but before we get into the nitty-gritty, let me give a little bit of a preface. In the last video, I designed this thing, the Q prop, or Quake prop, or somebody called it the Lollipop prop, so I'll call it the Loliprop. Now, the going theory that I have is that it kind of combines the weirdness of the zipline wishbone prop as well as the fascination we have with the MIT Toroidal propeller. But as you saw, they kept on exploding. Now, I postulated that they were warping outwards and scratching on the inside of my Veyron's prop guards over here, and that was causing the issue, but upon further study and inspection of the whole system, I actually ran on the desktop. Very dangerous to do this, but I did it anyway because I wanted to see some close-up shots of the way props tend to warp as they spin up. When I tested my Loliprop, basically I could feel the vibrations because I'm holding the drone down to make sure it doesn't like fly away. Again, don't do this. It's really stupid if you do something. If you make a mistake and the drone does actually try to take off, then you're screwed. But while I held it down, I could feel the vibration from the prop. So it was very clearly imbalanced. Now, they were perfectly balanced. Well, not perfectly balanced. They were very, very well balanced in Fusion 360, but I theorized correctly that FDM printing, flavor that I like to use, deposits plastic somewhat inconsistently, such that the counterweight section was in fact just a little bit lighter weight than it realistically should be. I had no idea my cat was inside. Oh, I. There you go. If anybody is into cats, this is one of mine. We need to put you outside. Right. Where was I? So like I said, props, imbalance, no bueno. Basically, I did a little bit of experimentation by basically trying to balance the prop a little bit on a shaft and noticing that it tended to walk to one side, even though just from feeling it, you can tell that it's pretty well balanced as it is. But of course, it's really fine differences. So I even precariously used rusty cutter blade, trying to sort of roughly balance it. So part of my solution for this was to basically use automotive touch-up paint as a way of increasing the mass on the counterweight side. And that actually did work because the vibrations did reduce by a certain amount, but the application of this paint leaves a little bit to be desired because in the end, if you try to put this on really evenly, like you might end up making the coat too thick on one side, a little bit too thin on the other, and so it's not a consistent way to do it. Ideally, resin printing the props would work the best because then they'd be balanced straight off the print bed or from the print vat. But the problem is a lot of people have discovered that 3D printing props using resin doesn't quite work as well as we wish it did. It's a little bit too brittle or a little bit too flexible, or I don't know the specifics, but that's an issue. So in the end, use this stuff, manage to get it somewhat balanced, or at least as balanced as they can be. So with that, how did it work? Yep, it exploded. But let's go to the slow motion replay. Okay, I'll never get over that slow motion audio, that kind of sound. Anyway, that could be the end of the video. However, I did do a new design. I took my tri-loop, like so, and I removed one of the loops and then put a counterweight in that place. So effectively, I created a counterweighted bi-loop toroidal propeller, the CWBLTP, right? It's not the most catchy acronym, so I'll leave you guys to decide of a funny name, but considering what we've actually tried today, maybe you won't have to think of one. Oh, nearly forgot. The counterweighted bi-loop design, I don't have any sample to show you, not a printed sample because they all exploded, but here's some nice footage courtesy of Fusion 360 showing the basic design of that prop. Now, straight off the print bed, I did the same testing to check the balance, and I found that it was actually much more balanced fresh off the bed than my single loop counterweight propeller. And so this is already looking a bit more promising. I did notice that it was still a little bit heavier on the loop side, so once again, I automotive touch-up painted it in order to get the weight a little bit better. And I'm pleased to say that it actually flies. It's a bit odd sounding, right? It's actually really odd sounding, especially if you compare it to the other props, which I handily also tested. But as you can see, or hear more accurately, my original imperfect tri-loop propellers actually sound much more normal than the counterweight ones. In fact, the counterweight ones sound kind of angry and aggressive. Now, if that isn't enough to convince you that the original tri-loop toroidal is better than the counterweighted one, I'll just show you the rest of the flight footage. And now once more in glorious slow motion. Oh, that's really cool watching the shards. But as you can see, my counterweighted props eventually exploded in midair. Now, there's also some value to listening to the sound in slow motion, so to speak, because you can kind of hear the timbre of the props a little bit easier. You can kind of hear how they sound different and what that might do in terms of our perception of loudness. Now, Cinewhoops, these tend to sound like screaming banshees because their props are really small and they have to spin really, really fast. So it's very high pitched, whereas larger propped drones like this Roma F6 that I got, they spin much slower, and as a result, their pitch tends to be lower and a bit more whooshy. A big part of the MIT paper on why toroidals are supposed to be quieter is not actually the fact that they're quieter, but more to do with how bassy they sound. They tend to take that high-pitched little whine off the edge by having this toroid shape. That's the theory. And interestingly, my tri-blade actually does seem to sound a little less annoying than even the injection-molded regular prop, which is interesting. But anyway, aside from telling myself that toroidals still have some kind of place in the quadcoptery world, the real purpose of this video is to say, don't bother trying this. Counterweighting props is really difficult. Balance plays a crucial role in whether or not they'll explode or not explode. And I was correct in thinking that FDM printing wouldn't really cut it. The reason why this worked, basically, is because the printer follows the exact same instructions to produce each section of the shape. Whereas when you're doing a counterweight, it's following different instructions to fill up the counterweighted part. And if the infill, overlap amount, percentage, and all this stuff isn't quite right, the balance goes off. It might be possible, if you were really diligent, to change your print settings in order to get the counterweighted section to balance, but I feel like that's a lot of effort to put into. And that doesn't take into account the other issues with counterweighted props that I believe also play a role in their explodiness. You see, with a traditional prop, you've got lift being generated on all sides. So in this case, we have a 3-blade, tri-blade prop, and it's generating roughly the same amount of lift on all 3 blades. So it's basically creating a net upward force like this, which is good. That's exactly what you want to do. The issue with a counterweighted prop like this is that the majority of lift is being produced on one side only. And if more lift is being produced here than there, then what you end up doing is twisting it like that. Now, yes, it is spinning at great speed, and so it might even out at high speeds, but ultimately, as you're spinning it, it's basically producing a torquing, twisting force on the entire motor assembly. Why is this bad? Well, let's think about it. We've already seen that if you badly turn a quad, too high D-term or whatever, you can actually burn out a motor because the ESC is trying to speed it up and slow it down, and it's just pumping so much energy into the motor to try and govern its operation that it overheats and it might cook itself. This could mean cooking the actual windings itself if the enamel burns out, or even toasting the bearings, which now means that they won't spin properly, and it basically compounds. The more heat, the more friction, the more things go wrong. It kind of eats itself, right? Now imagine you've got a propeller like this, and it's actually putting a twisting force on the motor. That means it's going to be twisting against the bearings of the motor. It's going to generate heat, it's going to generate friction, and then as it expands, the friction increases, so it's kind of self-propelling issue here. And eventually, the motor's not going to be happy. The flight controller might also find it weird that the props are producing different amounts of lift at different points if they're not all in sync. I don't know how serious. I'm sure you could relax the tune a lot so that it doesn't try to do anything weird like that, but it just seems like it will cause more issues than it's potentially solving. And that, I think, is probably not a good time. All of this to say, don't try this at home. Not only, exploding prop plastic flying everywhere towards your face if you're not wearing glasses like this, or safety glasses would be better. But, you might end up cooking motors. So not only are you wasting plastic and littering it in your garden, but you're actually going to have to spend money on new motors. I actually already cooked 2. This is the test drone, if you saw in the video, and the rear motors, you will notice, are different from the front motors because I was doing a quick test and a beautiful plume of smoke was coming down from one of the motors. It looked absolutely beautiful. Unfortunately, the camera wasn't running, so I can't show it to you. But anyway, take my word for it. I don't think it's worth it. Don't bother trying it at home. I've already done it, so you don't need to. So that's about it. Please like the video if you did. If you've got your own thoughts on these silly propeller ideas, then leave them in the comments down below. Subscribe if you want to see more videos like this in the future, and if you'd like to support me, then there's also that YouTube super like thing, or you could also buy me a coffee. Links down in the description, along with any other useful bits of information that I think I can provide. Thanks again, and see you around. Oh, and by the way, I won't be experimenting for a bit since I've got some work coming up, so the next few weeks, this time I've run out of plastic again, so all those exploding props,